let's start off with the next two nights. If you were able to script both Bill Clinton and President Obama, what are the arguments that they each need to make, and how are they different?
Well, they're somewhat different not similar, but this. I think, obviously, in my view, if I was at least drafting or if I influencing, I think, President Clinton, I think everybody's showing this hazy image of this great bipartisanship in the 90s. I don't remember the bipartisanship on the first budget. I mean, I started that job 6'2" and 250 pounds, and this is all I got left after those years. So I don't remember that bipartisanship. And we also had a party that shut down the government over Medicare, Medicaid, education, the environment, or as we used to write in President Clinton's speech, M squared, E squared. And so the very things that we're talking about today are the battles that happened before. And if you want to see the economic growth we had before, you got to continue to fight and invest in the things that actually are most productive for the economy. That's number one. And I think the president, both on politics and policy, can draw parallels and similarity. That is President Clinton. President Obama has a different voice, and I think everybody else is doing some kind of contextualization. President Obama, I think, has to tell people where we're going, how he plans on getting there, and what I think are it's not a State of the Union, so I don't say that, but it's the affirmation of why 4 more years will bring the continued changes that are necessary for the country to grow. And I think they're similar at one level, but similar in the sense of the same values, same policies. I think President Clinton continues to be, I think, more political and with a little more edge as a former president with a 69% job approval. He had favorability rather than job approval.
He has spent a lot of time over the summer defining the differences between his view and Governor Romney's view. He spent much less time talking about what you just said, which is talking about where he's going.
He being President Obama.
He being President Obama. Why has he not done more of it? Why has he waited until the convention to do that in a more explicit way?
Well, I think this is a different stage. And I think my own view is, I think they were, as a campaign, extremely successful in defining the differences between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. And Mitt Romney, if you look at the summer, I think the president, which party, which candidate, which nominee has succeeded with their summer mission. We have a fall to go through, and I would say the Obama campaign has succeeded. Mitt Romney has a real difficult problem between working class, middle class voters identifying with him. And part of that is he gave them obviously fodder to work with, from his taxes to other issues that helped them accentuate where the Mitt Romney does not have the interests of hardworking middle-class families at heart or in the focus. You're now getting into the final part of the campaign, and you add the introduction and you introduce the second layer. Still the foundation, because the choice is clear. The choice of the two nominees is different. Their values are different. Their policies are different. Who they are sent to work in Washington or in the Oval Office for is different. And that said, you now add, I think, the important piece for the president to add, having laid somewhat of a foundation, which is an additional piece, which is this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there, without being a 12-step policy speech on these 9 things on health care. If he does that, it's not the speech, and I don't expect him to do that.
Let me do a quick follow-up, and then everybody else jump in. If it's not a State of the Union address, how can he give people the kind of vision you're talking about, or the kind of detail, explicitness about what he wants to do?
You guys will sit there and say, you'll look at what was missing and you'll highlight it without a doubt. I won't read it, but I predict it. I will read it. I'm joking. That said, my view is, look, if you think this is a State of the Union, get that out of your mind. It's a visionary piece with big goals set out for the country, somewhat of the roadmap we will take, but not the 10-point plan. That's not what it's going to be. It shouldn't be that. And I think it would be a mistake if it was that. But I want to go back to your first question. I think the Obama campaign has done a good job in my view, and the first part is distinguishing between these two individuals. It set the precedent now for the second part, and you can't get to the second part without the first part.
So
Jump in.
getting
Oh.
past the convention, what do you think the specifics ought to be going forward? Beyond the convention, where is he going to put an emphasis? What are real objectives for the second term?
Well, I think it's not like you all of a sudden say they're not the same objectives, but let me do one thing if I can back up. I'm a fan of politics. I like politics, not just for quote-unquote the sport. I think elections have consequences, and I think they matter. In 1995, the Republicans shut the government down. They shut it down. We had a huge debate in 96. No, I'm saying it could be 7, it could be 9 months later. We had a balanced budget agreement. Why? Because the Republicans came to the conclusion, all right, the guy's reelected. That was then, and this is now. Now, because the president got elected and not Bob Dole, you had a balanced budget agreement that also created, for the first time, a health care plan for children without health care whose parents work full-time. And that would not have happened had Bob Dole got elected. You had the doubling of the national parks. You had the creation of the Hope and Lifetime Learning tax credits that help middle-class families afford and send their kids to college education. You had reforms to Medicare that lengthened and strengthened Medicare for years on. All things that would have been different had Bob Dole gotten elected. But the consequence of the election was the Republicans had concluded he's the president. The battle we started in 93, opposing him universally. Not one vote for the 93 budget. That was then. It's a different date. And they could then work and cut a deal. I believe the Republicans, after the election, if President Obama wins, will say, that was then, this is now. The election, the voters issued a verdict, and we're done. And one other lesson. In 1998, when the Republicans, in 98, why did the Republicans in the 6th year of a presidency lose seats when they should have been winning? Because they refused to take the verdict of the election of the voters and try to follow through on an impeachment process. Voters didn't want to do that. Elections have meanings, they have consequences, and I believe if the president wins, it will have consequences, and the policy will be in the direction more investments in infrastructure, more investments in research and development, greater accountability in our education, building off race to the top, with a balanced approach to fiscal discipline that doesn't do in the short term damage that all the hard work that I think has been done in the 4 years, digging out of what was the worst economic recession since the Great Depression.
What are the odds now, Ron, that he will win?
What's that say again?
What are the odds that he will win, that Obama will be reelected?
I'm not doing odds until I see the debates.
But how do you feel about the state of the race right now?
It's a close. I think this, Al. It's a close race. Because of the, where things are. It's a close race because of where things. Oh, thank you. Was the Locks a comment about Judaism around here? I mean, what is that? All right. Anyway, you get one too. Okay. One is, it's a close race. I think the one thing I will say this, and you know my view about the summer, so I don't need to repeat that. I will say one other thing. The Romney campaign kept saying, this trip overseas is going to be a real game changer. It was a disaster. They constructed it. Nobody else constructed it. They constructed it. It was their trip. My view is if you can't make it as a tourist, you're not really going to make it as a chief of staff, a commander-in-chief. You're a tourist.
Much less the chief of staff.
Yeah, less than the chief of staff's horrible job. Number two, it was their convention. We have more energy in this room in one night than they had in 4 nights. The two things that they constructed didn't come off. This is real. This is prime time. You're running for president. Give me a break. And so I think the campaign, and campaigns do matter. How it's not everything. Campaigns matter. I don't think they've done a good job for their candidate. And I think the Obama campaign and President Obama have done a good job for his candidacy in a very difficult context.
When Bill Clinton entered office and when he left office, I think we had
We were all older.
We were younger then, but I think we had a pretty good understanding of what it meant to be a Bill Clinton Democrat.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a Barack Obama Democrat? I don't feel like I have that same concrete sense. And is there a difference between a Bill Clinton Democrat and a Barack Obama Democrat?
there is no difference. And I say that because I would describe myself as a new Democrat, that I, in the sense of what Bill Clinton reinvented the way we as Democrats post the Great Society, reinvented and thought through what government could do. Rather than do it, it inspired it. In the 60s, so let me give you a classic example of what I mean. In the 60s, we would have basically done a police program nationally. This is what's going to, and what we did was each city got police, but you had to adopt community policing to get those police. So you inspired the change towards community policing rather than demand it. If you didn't want it, you didn't have to apply for the cops. Okay? That's one example. I think the welfare reform, as I said on Sunday, all the Republicans could say, oh, this was a great part. No, we vetoed 2 of their bills before we got what was actually supposed to happen. Now, the President, Obama, shares exactly that kind of reinvention and rethinking of what government should do, should not do, and if it's going to do it, how it should do it differently. I think it's a fundamental different vision. There's an affirmative role for, let me just go. I saw you, there's an affirmative role for government to play. It can't play the role it used to play. It's still an affirmative force. You have to think through what it can do, what it should not even try to do, and if you're going to say it should do it, what is it you have to reinvent? I can talk, now I've, again, folks, been on the local level. I can give you example, chapter and verse of what I would do. But I think there are certain things like on infrastructure that are classic examples of what they could do differently to help us achieve our goals as an economy.
But where does that authority in Obama's presidency manifested itself? Of government not being able to do everything they were able to do?
Well, I will say, healthcare. I don't think, I worked on crime in the Clinton health era. You could not get the health care bill that President Obama signed into law, but you hadn't gone not only through the Clinton experience, learned certain things about Clinton. The bill that Barack Obama signed into law was as close to Senator Chafee's bill as you'll ever get. It was closer to Senator Chafee's bill than anything Republicans introduced in the last 10 years, and that's President Clinton's bill included the the big division between Clinton and Chafee was employee versus employer mandate. President Obama signed into law the employee mandate. Basically, that's what happened.
Rahm,
Yeah.
one of the most effective lines down at the Republican convention was this sense of lost hope.
Right.
The young kids with their faded Obama posters, the line about how the best day of the Obama administration was the day you voted for him, and then it's all been downhill from there. How do you get over or get past those kinds of messages?
Well, I don't know. I thought the best day of the Republican convention was Clint Eastwood. I mean, obviously, I remember it differently. So that's one. Two, look, you're not going to have in a re-election. Bill Clinton didn't have the same thing in 96 that he had in 92. George Bush didn't have the same thing in 04 that he had in 2000. He was running in a different context. He was a different president. That's just self-evident for every person who runs. And it's different. Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter in 1980, and by 84, it was a different type of debate and different type of context. You can't have that kind of freshness that came in 2008, but what you can have is the same, and I think Michelle advanced that last night, was the core person is still the same. And I think she did a tremendous job last night for the president, revealing and constantly reminding people who it is that she fell in love with, which I think was an essential, subtle message to all the public that voted for somebody in 08. Why you fell in love with this person is the same reason I did.
How does it affect the president that voters who used to love him now seem to only like him?
Well, that's better than the alternative. It could have been the other thing. That's one. And I don't buy that. First of all, I don't buy your premise.
But the polls show that if you talk to people,
No,
I mean, you said it yourself, the freshness is gone.
Well, that's
People
yeah.
get disappointed, they're still not wild about
But
Romney. but they don't-
there's three things that let me say this. I'm trying to. I know we're doing live streams. So I want to have an honest conversation without playing a gotcha game with you guys. Okay? In 1992, Bill Clinton ran. First of all, he didn't run in the same context of the economic collapse. Totally different. Bill Clinton ran as a new Democrat who was going to change his party. There was people wavering by 94. Some of us remember, some people, even in this building, were talking about trying to find a primary challenge to Bill Clinton in 94, right after the midterm. He held people because it was about whether he was going to change his party. He ran as a new Democrat. For the people who work hard, play by the rules, which is a different value system than we were associated with as a party, this is going to be your chance. And by 96, they saw that, A, the economy was doing better, and B, also, they felt that the president had made some of the changes that he promised. Part of the challenge the president has is, unlike running as, quote unquote, I'm going to change my party, he was going to change the tone in Washington. And so there is both an economic piece to it, and I know this for a fact because as a student of both polling focus groups, they don't blame him for what he inherited. They know he inherited a bad deal, their bad deal. And he has made changes and significant progress, but not enough that they have felt it. If you ask for where, quote unquote, the disappointment, it is in the context of Washington's coarseness. And I think the president shares that frustration with the public.
Hey, Rahm, do you...
So they separate the two, political and economic.
Rahm, another refrain at the Republican convention was to play off of the president's "you build it" comments to try to portray him as anti-business. And you see that's been a pretty persistent strategy. Do you worry, whatever you think about how the comments, do you worry
I worry about everything.
That's resonating out in the public, and do you think that...
No, I think the bigger issue is the ones, I think that feeds into more the kind of the sense of coarseness, the debate. I worry about it. I don't think it's healthy for the country. I don't believe the rhetoric. So on a fundamental thing, because I know he's not hostile to business. I know he also believes that business creates the jobs that are necessary. Government creates the kind of environment and atmosphere for economic growth and job creation to happen. And I don't, and I have a different view of the relationship for I know what his attitude is towards business as an essential role. I don't think that kind of sense of division or hostility is, I know it's not one he wants, and I also know he doesn't think it's good for the country.
Do you think you need to do more to counteract that or rebut it than you have thus far?
You always got to work on every piece of making sure that any attack by your opponent doesn't go unanswered. So I would stay on that.
You mentioned the local level earlier. It seems like in Chicago you face a lot of the issues that are roiling state houses in Wisconsin and Ohio in terms of how much public sector employees have to give to keep their governments afloat. How do Democrats such as yourself balance that with not permanently damaging this long-term coalition between the Democratic Party and organized labor?
Well, let me try to walk you through I can only reflect on what I'm doing. I don't want to do it for everybody else. I believe, well, look, as a mayor of the city of Chicago, and I think mayors right now, big cities have a strategic advantage we did not have 30 years ago. When people used to leave to the suburbs and take their companies to campus-like things, they now want to be in cities. They want to be where the younger workers, more energetic workers are. So we have an advantage. But because our density and our youthful and educated workforce is an advantage, we also have to do certain things. We have to, and I'm I think, making one of the biggest investments in infrastructure of any mayor in this country. We are literally building a new airport at O'Hare, the equivalent of Midway, with the runways, 3 runways. We are making a massive investment in our mass transit system because one of our advantages is moving people expeditiously from home to work, and it's our strategic advantage. We have now added more protected bike lanes than any other city in the country, and on the course to being the most bike-friendly city in the country. Why? Because the younger workers and the entrepreneurial companies like that form of transportation and that option. We are building the largest water infrastructure, replacing every pipe that's 100 years or older, 900 miles. We're replacing 2,000 to 4,000 miles of road, repaving half the city. I mean, I can go chapter and verse, but you don't want to hear it all, what we're all doing on our parks, our schools, our community colleges, etc. That is also, I don't do it for the building trades, but it is putting a lot of people, 30,000 people in the building trades are going to go to work in the next 3 years in the city of Chicago, building up our city and creating a new and better city. So not all organized labor is upset, and I didn't do it for that. I did it for the economic competitiveness, but I do believe it's in Chicago's interest, and people will go to work in the building trades doing that. We, though, have to make some difficult choices on the local level of government. Things were promised, and it's not, again, public employees are not wrong. They were promised. They were signed contracts. You have to appreciate the perspective of a firefighter, a teacher, a police officer. They got something agreed to. I'm specifically talking about A, on healthcare, and B, on retirement. And now we have to change that because things were agreed to that everybody knew when they were at the table they could not keep. Why did everybody say that we're going to have a return on 8% on equity? We haven't had a return on 8% of equity in a decade. The reason people agreed to that because nobody wanted to say how much you really had to contribute to get to that type of retirement. And so that was a number that everybody could put down. So their view is, look, we agreed to something, we kept our side of the deal, and you did. A lot of cities, including Chicago and states, did not pay what they were required under the contract. The employees, every pay stub, ding, ding, 9.2%, 9.2%. They did it. So we're making changes. It's difficult. And we're changing what people had expectation to get, contractually and emotionally and mentally. I looked at Dan only having worked in the Bloomberg. That's a tough thing to do. Look at all of you when your management does it to you. Makes downsizing changes. It's a tough decision. So imagine that for a firefighter whose spouse is a school teacher or working in a bank, and their economic expectations of what they've been building towards changes all of a sudden. Now, I went to organized labor, some unions supported me, but basically did not, okay? I went to immediately after the election. I said, let's find something to work together on. First thing out of the box, we have the largest wellness plan in the country, public or private, 42,000 employees. 32 of 33 unions said yes to it because they knew healthcare costs were stealing, for them, wages. Now, I don't want to get into it, but if you work on your we had 6% of the workforce driving 2/3 of the costs over diabetes, weight, smoking, heart, cholesterol. Just the basics. 2/3 healthcare costs. $400 million, hold on one second, $400 million, 6% of the workforce, 5 illnesses. They were my partner. We're already going to see $20 million of savings this year. And I expect more as we go on. So they can be a partner in that reform. You know I'm making major changes in our community colleges. I just got an agreement with the teachers union at the community colleges for merit pay based on the employment success of their students. It ends step and lane at the teachers level. It has a COLA that we can afford. It saves the community college system $10 million over the span, and it's a 5-year contract. There's other changes to it. They're a partner in this major reinvention I'm doing at community colleges to a college-to-career program that actually President Obama in his recent State of the Union took a page out of. So labor can be a partner. I have a simple message. Sit at the table, be a partner in change, and it will be a win-win. But I will not accept the status quo. And the taxpayers don't accept it. You can't accept it. We can't stay on this course and expect a different result. Work with me and be a partner in change. I have 4 unions agreed to changing reducing a lawsuit at McCormick Place. It's now winning more shows, creating more jobs. We just have managed competition, streets and sanitation versus waste management. We have enough savings. We're taking recycling citywide, just through competition. And they've agreed to it. There's places where it's agreed. There's places we still got challenges. But you have to rethink what government can do, can't do, and if it's going to do it, how do we do it different? Not just so we do more with less. Yes, more with less, but actually, in some cases, like recycling, expand services. In some cases, here's what I did. I told the laborers union, I'm going to do what I'm doing on infrastructure, whether you make this change or not. But I expect some work rule changes. They just gave me $30 million of changes. Why? Because I just told them I got them a decade worth of work. In the Chicago municipal wing of the laborers union, largest growth of employment of any laborers union in the country, with a 30 million, with major changes to break-in, and I just got them to agree that 25% of their workforce will be graduates of the Chicago public school system, giving minority kids, for the first time, a chance at a trade. But I said, here's what we're going to invest in. You can be a partner, and they've made major changes that have saved taxpayers a huge amount of money, and getting their members huge guaranteed long-time employment.
You're talking about really, in a lot of ways, a constructive role government plays. And we heard a lot last week in Tampa where you got the opposite message. So how much would you like to see, two things really, should the president make the case for the constructive role that government plays in people's lives? And then the second thing more broadly, when you look at demographics now in the country, and if you're in your party, if you can get through this election, the urban-rural divide, demographics seem to really be in your favor.
I wouldn't build a political party on demographics as destiny. But based on demographics, I'd rather be us than them. And I think they're making I'm not in the business of giving the other party political advice. I think they're making a fundamental mistake. An exclusive party is not the future. You have to be an inclusive party. It's just a big mistake. And the smart ones in their own party know it. And they're scared of what's going on.
And about the constructive role of government?
I don't know if I would say, I don't know, I don't know if I would go, I know I would not. I would not give a speech about the role of government. I wouldn't do that. I think you can talk about the goals you have for the country, define those, without having to define government. I think that would be a mistake. This is not a political science class tomorrow night, rather. Not. Define the roles for the country, its goals. Chief executives in public life set goals. Put a man on the moon. Eradicate a disease. X in education. Double the size of our exports in the next 5 years. You set goals. You don't sit there and do a tutorial about. So I wouldn't do that. And I love the president, as you know. So let me say this. I love him. I've enjoyed working with him as a chief of staff, enjoyed working with him as a senator and congressman, and enjoyed our friendship that Michelle, Barack, Amy, and I have. A speech that was a tutorial would go to the wrong strong suit for this president. So I went to it.
Can you expand on that?
Josh, jump in.
You've had a unique vantage point of the relationship, the evolving relationship, I guess you could say, between President Obama and President Clinton. Could you talk about that a little bit in the lead up to the speech tonight?
Well, you know, I think, why is this not, I don't understand why this is complicated. President Obama beat Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton's a very protective husband and very competitive. Took him more time to get over. Got over it. And I know this. He voted for Barack Obama in 2008. He's going to vote for him in 2012, and he's going to campaign vigorously for him wherever he wants. 2008 took him a little time. Didn't take him so much time that he didn't vote for him. Okay? It's not that hard. And I think Eddie likes him. Okay? It's not, I don't think this is complicated.
Brent, back to the post-reelection movement. Republicans, I mean, you said after Clinton won, there was a budget deal, but there was also impeachment. I mean, in this case,
I don't think it'll be
impeach. But they could decide, presumably, okay, now time to make a deal. They could decide we shouldn't have nominated a moderate from Massachusetts. What do you think will determine whether there is compromise in Washington in the few months after?
Well, let me say one thing. I will say, you know, we had different energy in one of the things. This is a political shot. I mean, it's an observation with a political edge. I don't think their party's too happy with their nominee. The reason you didn't have energy in that room wasn't because they don't know how to put a convention on. They're more excited about the class of 2016 and Paul Ryan than they are about their own nominee. Let me say this. I've done a few conventions. I guarantee the fire marshals will close down the place when Barack Obama gets Thursday. Or empty seats Thursday when Mitt Romney spoke. That's a comment. I've never been to a convention, 92, 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, that on the night the nominee speaks, the fire marshal doesn't shut the place down. Because you're over, you know, hey, some jerk like me is printing more tickets than we have, and then people are just filing it. They had empty seats. Yes, if they lose, they're going to have like we do when we lose, well, they'll have their internal moderate, where, you know. I think you can't be a national party and be an exclusive party. They have a sign, not wanted. You can't do that.
So, but what would that mean for a budget deal?
I didn't say I was going to answer the question. I said I'm going to eat breakfast and get out of here. Okay?
Ron, Al Hunt asked you the question.
Hold on, I'm going to finish. So they will have a debate. You were right. One ideological. Part of it will be personality. If John Boehner, and I don't hope not, but if John Boehner is still the speaker, I think I know. I mean, we served together. He will lose seats. He may lose a majority, but he'll lose seats either way. He's not gaining. And I think he will not be the same if he's still speaker. If big I don't come out of here. Emnauel predicts Speaker Boehner. Okay, I didn't say that. He's still speaker. He will have a different hand and a set of cards than he did when the debt limit came. It's just the nature of what an election does. And you think of that debt limit after, if it had happened, not where it happened in time, but after an election, it would have been a different outcome in my view. So that's what I mean. Now.
But it did happen after. Happened after the 2010.
Yeah, and elections have
right.
consequences. And he also, I suppose I could say this, I mean, I don't know, it'll get me in trouble. He didn't have control of his own caucus. He did. And he says it privately. So I said it publicly. Go ahead.
When Al asked you who you thought was going to win, and you said that you wanted to see what happened in the debates, can you talk a little bit about, one, how debates make a difference and what you expect each candidate's going to try to stress?
Well, I think because this is going to be a close election. That's not an insight. Okay, it's going to be a close election, and it's going to be tight. I think the quote-unquote undecided voter is caught between conflicting emotions right now, and I think they're going to hold out to the very end and make a decision. And I think they are going to make it, and that's why I think it's smart also for the Obama campaign to make this a clear choice. Because I think once you put two men side by side, they warm to the individual that I'm supporting, President Obama. But they're not going to make a decision, given it's down to 4 or 5%, depending on state. It could be a little more and it could be a little less. They're not going to make that decision before they have to make that decision. I think to this date, I think Mitt Romney's missed a chance, which the convention provided him, to get all that closer to making the close. That's why I think the debates, you didn't need the convention for that, but I think the debates will play an essential role in this campaign because you have so few voters left, and they are still in so few states. There are so few voters left in so few states. And even right now, as you and I are speaking, some of the states that we think are on that kind of battleground are starting to come off. Slowly, it's starting to come off. So it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And to have that needle move either way, the debates will be consequential. And not all three debates are equal. Not all three. prediction, the foreign policy debate will have less of an audience than the domestic. I'm going out on the limb here.
Do you think the VP pick matters? Do you think the vice president pick matters?
Sure. I don't think it matters. Yeah, it matters. I don't think it's, but every bit counts. If you think it's like I think it, no, maybe, I don't know, maybe other people have a different view that this is a bigger swing. I don't. I think this is a tight election. And I think every day matters, every choice matters. Where you go, what you say, what you're talking about.
And is Ryan a plus for Romney?
Yes and no. It's not. I mean, it's not. The scales don't tip automatically.
Hey, Ron, could I ask you? Can you talk about?
How about this? Let me do this.
Chuck takes precedent. Thank you, Chris.
I know. He looked like he was going to break down and cry. I was like,
I don't want that. I'm Jewish too, Ron. I worry about everything.
Good.
So in 2008, when the president won, there was a lot of talk of one kind or another about this being the harbinger of kind of a permanent Democratic majority that had a lot to do with demographics. And furthermore, sort of an opportunity to kind of, and I think the president talked about this himself, to sort of, in the way Reagan had built a kind of permanent conservative shift, to sort of build a permanent progressive shift. You know what's happened in all the elections since then, and even in a second term, it seems like it's mostly going to be a defensive term. What happened to all that? Is it over for good?
No,
problem? Or?
Well, first of all, you made a comment. I'm not ready. It's going to be defensive in the second term. I don't. Based on what? What evidence?
Well, unlike you, I'm willing to say I think the Republicans will probably take the House, and therefore.
And if President Obama takes the White House, it's not like he doesn't have some role to play.
No, that's true. But
Okay.
we've seen how difficult the last 2 years have been to get.
Yeah, well, Republicans took the House in '94. They tried to shut the government down. I think if you ask them today, in his historical perspective, I think they said they made a big mistake. It took about a year and a half later, 2 years later, they got rid of the speaker that did that. Okay, so I'm not ready, and I think the budget agreement we reached was not the budget they would have drafted on their own, because that led to the government shutdown. They made major concessions. They never even had a kids' health care plan in their idea. They never thought about nationally doubling our nation's parks. They never thought about college tax credits for middle-class families to send their kids to college. None of that would have existed. So that said, I'm not ready to concede a fundamental premise of your question, which is that it will be defensive. And no, let me say this, and I've been through this with two presidents. Every time somebody says, Bill Clinton at one point responded at a press conference where he says, I'm still relevant. That was in the first term. Don't ever tell me the president's not relevant. The president's relevant, nothing defensive. And I would also argue, if you look at Reagan and Clinton's second term, it's not only not just consequential in the first year, it's consequential all the way through. Ronald Reagan did many major things on immigration in the latter half of his second term. Bill Clinton did China, WTO, Kosovo. Major things in the latter half of the second term. So I don't buy any of that premise, and I don't buy the premise that it would be defensive.
Chris, jump in.
What about the progressive,
Chris,
shift?
Wait, let's turn to Chris.
I want to follow up on, I think, some part of what Chuck was asking, which is, you talk about it's going to be close no matter what. Was 08 anomalous as a reflection of the broader electorate? Are we, I assume Obama's not going to win the 365 electoral votes again, but was it, in your view, as a political strategist, not as a mayor of Chicago?
Let me tie this two things. First of all, I'm not ready. I want to see if I can say this without getting, again, jumped, okay? I believe Clintonism has outlasted Clinton's presidency, but I don't think the coalition has. And I'm both a disciple of Clintonism and Clinton coalition politics. The country today is different than the one Bill Clinton got elected and Jimmy Carter got elected. And I do believe, I don't know, classic example, Bill Clinton and I mean, I was with Bruce Reed, the lead negotiator for the president on welfare reform. The guy that designed the welfare to work for the state of Illinois was a guy called Senator Barack Obama. Is he a disciple or not of Clintonism? He rethought what government can do. We as Democrats have to offer not a detailed political science class on what government can and can't do, but through our policies, a redefinition of the role of government in an affirmative way without it being an all-encompassing entity. And that reinvention is happening as we're talking about it. And I think it will also has a tremendous influence on the coalition. The Hispanic voters today are different voters than they were in 92, 96, and going back to 1976. And we're the same party.
Rahm, I know you have to go. Let me just ask you this.
I thought I was staying for lunch.
That's great.
Okay,
Well, it'll be a feast, a movable feast. And taxes and Medicare, how do they play out in the next 7 weeks?
I don't think they're going to play out any different than what they played out there for the last 7 months. I think it's after the next 7 weeks that it'll be an interesting time from November to January, I'll say that.
Rahm, there's actually, I thought, very good article in the magnificently produced Bloomberg Insider today.
What's that again, Dan?
The Bloomberg Insider. Actually, pretty conclusively demonstrated.
Let me be careful.
Thank you very much.
Does the live stream have that, please?
That's all I wanted. I can stop now. No, it actually makes the point, I think, pretty conclusively that African Americans are worse off today than they were 4 years ago if you measure it by, especially the gap between whites and blacks has increased. In your own city, despite the fact that you've made heroic efforts really to recruit business, unemployment is still over 10%. Do you think that the administration has been an effective partner with cities? What more could the Obama administration have done to improve the situation in cities?
Well, first of all, I've said this before, let me say this again. I think it is a strategic advantage to be a mayor of a city today. I also have a different view. Let me just say this. There are 100 cities in the world that are where the economic energy, creativity, and cultural energy of the world economy is. Shanghai, Paris, Berlin. No, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I don't think it's in Yonkers, and I don't think it's in Schaumburg. Okay? It's in Chicago, it's in Paris, it's Berlin, it's Shanghai, and Tokyo. That's where economic activity, energy, cultural creativity, the research is going on. That's what's happening. So cities are, I think, now in the forefront of the economy, where we all grew up in a period of time that they were kind of like, oh my God, how do we do more retail to hold on to? It's our culture, it's our economic energy, it's our universities. I can't think of the city of Chicago without either the universities or the airport. You couldn't even imagine it. So that said, the biggest problem relating, Dan, to what you talked about is education. Simple. And I'm going to do one anecdote. I am converting our community colleges. In the city of Chicago, the mayor has control over the city colleges. We have 6 of them. I am making each community college a college to career program. So Malcolm X now is only healthcare. Rush Presbyterian, Northwestern Hospital, Abbott Labs, Walgreens, all Scripps are in there doing the curriculum training, training the faculty, and that's all it will do. Olive Harvey on the south side of the city of Chicago is just going to do transportation, distribution, and logistics. Now, we picked all of these, and I don't want to run through all of what we're doing. In the industry, UPS, FedEx, Chicago's Transportation Authority, CSX, Norfolk Southern, Centerpoint, the big intermodal, are all doing the curriculum. They're all running it because Chicago's actually a juggernaut on transportation, distribution, and logistics. Eritrom, this company, came to us and said, look, we saw what you're doing at Olive Harvey. We just started 2 weeks ago, class just opened. But this came months ago. And I said, we love what you're doing at your Olive Harvey. We want to build the largest air cargo facility at a gateway airport at O'Hare. Now, one of the things is I'm building these huge runways for the new airplanes. Plus, I have this guaranteed workforce coming out of Olive Harvey. Truck drivers and logistic operators and forklift operators. We have classes now on that. They're building the largest. It's going to employ 12,000 people over the next decade. The way to make sure, in my view, to deal not just with African American, but also Hispanic, but anything, the entire workforce, is to have a complete educated workforce skills. And what I mean by that, I have Booth and Kellogg business schools in my city. Great. I have University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Fermi, Oregon, Purdue in Indiana, University of Illinois, DePaul, Loyola. I can go through it. Roosevelt. I can lead them all. Okay, all the universities. Great four-year institute. We have more alumni from the Big Ten states than any other city in the country. Our educated four-year college is 34% of our population. Nationally, it's 27. Great. Now, what's missing? Sorry about that. Don't ever ask a guy a question if you don't want him to filibuster.
Especially when he doesn't answer your question.
No, I'll answer. No, but here's the thing. No,
the one thing you haven't said thus far, and everything
no.
you said is anything about the federal government.
Yes, I will. But the federal government's got its own budget issues. If I sat around here, the reason I did an infrastructure bank is I'm not going to sit around and wait for dysfunction to come running home and save me. I have to, as best as I can, create my own and chart my own course for my city. Now, if the federal government would pass a major infrastructure investment, big deal. They want to invest in city colleges and give us more reward for changing our school system, great. That's what I'm for. If I sat here and waited, I'd be, do you think Mike Bloomberg wait? No. Okay, you can't do it. I'm not in the position. First of all, does anybody think I'm patient about anything? I'm not patient. I can't wait. I have to do as best I can, chart my own course. That said, the most important thing to do for African American, Hispanics, and everybody, but to recruit companies, is I'm going to give you a Booth School graduate from the School of Entrepreneurial, and I'm going to give you a graduate of Olive Harvey in Transportation Distribution Logistics. And I'm going to give you everything in between. DePaul, Loyola, Booth, University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Olive Harvey, Malcolm X. The most important thing I can do to an employer, and let me say this, now I'm really going to get off this. Taxes are important. I have never sat in an office with a CEO who said, that's it. I tell them I got the best trained workforce, the best investment in infrastructure, and I'll give you the most transparent government so it will be a partner, not a problem for you, and they'll come. Taxes are important. They are not an economic policy. They are not an economic policy. They're an important issue. People want to know where certainty is. Is it 4? Is it 3? Whatever. But if I told them, then let me say, the way I say it is this. I'll give you 0 corporate tax rate, but I'm going to shut down O'Hare. You think anybody comes to Chicago? Anybody? Well, LaGuardia is a different question. Yeah, okay. You think anybody would do that? No. If I said, okay, I'll give you 0 tax rate, but I'm going to take Booth School and Kellogg Business School, and I'm going to shut them down. Come on. Let's have a real discussion. And the best thing I can do to make sure my workforce is got what they need to close that economic gap is closing the skill gap. And I got to assure companies that they have everything from Booth to Olive Harvey and everything between. And if I do that, I'm doing what I think is responsible to put the city in its best foot forward to create jobs and close the income and educational gap in the city of Chicago or anywhere in America. But I only care about the city of Chicago.
Mr. Mayor, you can.
No way, man.
No,
You got somebody
you
else.
can stay as long as you wish. You really can. You have stayed. You have been wonderful.
I've stayed way beyond what
No,
I'm
but I'm
supposed to.
surprised because Meredith Webster has always extolled your patience. I'm really surprised that you told us you weren't patient.
Let me say this. Amy, as you know, has said if we ever had a 4th child, she was going to name it Patience as a subtle reminder.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.